Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Rob Phelan. I am with ChooseFI International Foundation. This is our summer series, and tonight we are talking about investing for kids. This is the 9th video on our summer series. So if you haven't seen any of the others so far, if this is your first time joining us, there are lots of different topics we have covered throughout the summer with lots of amazing guests. You can find that at ChooseFI Foundation /events. But before we move forward, we are going to be talking about investing for kids, both like how do you get started as like an adult wanting to invest on behalf of a kid, and then how do you actually get your kids started investing for themselves. I'm joined by two amazing guests tonight. I have Doug Nordman and Julia Alma Taveras, who are joining us to share their amazing wisdom and knowledge, which is far greater than mine. Do you want to introduce yourselves? Doug, you can go first.
Hello, everybody. I'm Doug Nordman. I'm the military guide, but I'm also the author with my daughter of Raising Your Money Savvy Family for Financial Independence, Next Generation Financial Independence. And it tells the stories of what we went through raising her to an adult and now what she's doing raising her family. So that gives you plenty of ideas, specific tactics on how to do this. Check your library. It's in your library. And enjoy the book when you look for ways to inspire your kids.
Thank you so much. Julie, welcome. I think you're on mute, Julie.
Hi, everyone.
My name you're new to the whole online thing, right?
Yeah. I blurred out all of 2020. I'm Julia Alma Taveras. I founded Investing Latina. I love talking about investing. I'm looking forward to sharing my story on how I am investing for children in my family because I do not yet have my own. I think it's such an important topic. So I'm so happy to be here with both of you.
All right. Well, thank you both for joining us tonight. So we're going to try and break down for parents, for any kids who are watching. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. And anyone who is an adult, kind of like Julie, where you've got extended family or other kids in your lives that you're really interested in helping to get started. We've got a lot of perspectives going on here, and we're going to try and dive into each of those. So the first one is going to be, when should we start? Doug, what do you think?
Well, kids don't have any interest in investing until they're probably late adolescence, early teens. The first thing is to teach them to manage the money. You know, they want to physically hold it and operate it and lose it or spend it unwisely. And they want to have that kind of experience at managing their money before they're even ready to talk about saving, let alone investing. At a younger age, you know, when kids are 6 or 7 or 8 years old, they're pretty sure parents are crazy, because all parents want to do is take their money and put it in something called the college fund. And when you're 7 years old, this makes no sense because that's a couple of lifetimes away, and they've already seen enough of school. They can't imagine anybody wanting to pay for more school after they get out of school. So the first thing is to teach these kids to manage their money and make a bunch of spending decisions. As they get older, though, they'll become aware that there are people out there who make a lot of money by investing in stuff, and they'll hear your family conversations when you talk about it. And as soon as they start joining in those conversations, that means they're ready to start learning about saving and investing.
Yes, absolutely. What do you think, Julie? Agree, disagree, add more?
Yeah, I think that it's really important to start as soon as you're ready to family plan. So I think that, you know, there's really great ways for you to do it. You can get started by having the 529 if you're going to do the college investing route, because there are, of course, other routes that you can invest in for children. But if you're going to do the 529, go ahead, put that 529 in your name. And when you have your bundle of joy, you can go ahead and transfer that information over to them. So I think it's really a great thing to think about, even as you're planning to grow your family. A lot of times we're not that ahead of things, and things. And I have a lot of students that come in and they're like, "Oh, my child is 10 years old and I want to start saving for college." And then that's when you really kind of have to think about and assess what are the pros and cons to having a 529, starting what can be considered a little bit late because, of course, 10 years have already passed since they've been around. But it's still not too late. You know, I still encourage people to do it if they really do feel like the child is already going through a path of wanting to continue school. Like, I have two little cousins, and one of them he's 12 years old and he's pretty set on studying engineering. So he's into that. And it's so great to kind of see it. That may not always be the case for all children, but it's so great to kind of see what interests they already have that may lead to having to go to higher education, right? So there's always opportunities to start. There is no must on when you should do it. Obviously, with compounding interest and time, you're going to gain much more than what you're putting into the account, but there is still a lot of flexibility in terms of when you can start.
Yeah, and I like that you mentioned like family planning and planning for future generations. I think that's where a lot of us kind of come down to as well, is that when we are doing a financial independence journey, we are trying to create generational wealth. So it may not even be just for your next immediate generation. It could be for the ones following that as well. Just like you suggested, when my wife and I found out we were pregnant, we started a 529 account before he was even born, and it's in my name. And at some point, I will just have to transfer it over to be him as the beneficiary, because with college savings accounts, with 529 accounts, you can change that beneficiary at any point. And say like the first child doesn't use it, you can switch it to the next child, or you can switch it to a grandchild or the cousin, nephew, whatever you want. You can basically name a child, anyone as a beneficiary on these accounts. All right. Tommy says, working my son's first word being index fund. How's that going, Tommy? I like the ambition.
Great.
I like the ambition.
And you know what? That might be a little bit easier than other words, index. I think that might be hard. Maybe you can do index.
It's probably better than brokerage account anyway.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Okay, so we've got the idea of college, which I think parents feel a lot of responsibility for that, at least in the beginning, like that we're going to try and get our kids at least a start on paying for college, or potentially cover it all. But what about just like investing for their own financial future? So if we're looking beyond college and we want kids to start building wealth for themselves, when would you start? Would you start? So Doug, would you wait until they're old enough to manage it before you even start? Or would you kind of start without them knowing and then kind of transfer ownership? What would you do?
Well, as parents, you're going to start 529 as early as you can. You might as well get one going. You don't know how life is going to turn out. And keep in mind that 529 for college might not involve any college. There's a lot of things that can be done outside of college. If a kid isn't ready for college as they finish high school, then at least that's a wonderful time to start learning about the trades. And then once you have an interest from the child on investing, saving, then encourage that. And so you can do the 529 on your own while they're still in diapers. You've got plenty of time for compounding. That's one separate account that you will need later on in life. However, once they start learning to manage their own money, and once they're comfortable with the actual currency and handling it and making bad decisions with it, that's what they're going to excel at, right? Taking a $20 bill, lighting it on fire, and running around like a 4th of July sparkler. As long as you got that mental image, that's what your kid is going to learn for managing their money. But once they settle down, they might be ready to learn about saving and investing it. And at that point, now you have teachable moments. Now you can talk about how they felt spending all their money and ending up with nothing. How they felt saving for a toy. Did that toy work out the way they thought? How they felt saving for something even bigger, some bigger event, and whether that worked out for them. And those conversations can lead to the idea that if they put money away in a savings account, that they can earn interest. And I'm not talking today's bank interest. I'm talking the interest paid by the bank of mom and dad, or the bank of kid, whatever you want to call it, where for every dollar they put on deposit, they get paid 1 penny per month. And kids don't do percentages at a young age, but they can certainly understand getting a penny every dollar every month. And we'd all like to invest at that bank. And just by doing that, you can market it aggressively. Show them how much money that's accumulating every month, show them how their wealth is growing, show them how things happen. And eventually they'll understand that if they put their money away in some deferred gratification, I think asking a month from a 7 or 8-year-old is a pretty big commitment. Later on, you can start talking about long-term deferred gratification of investing in stocks. And as they gain money from the bank of mom and dad or the bank of kid with that interest rate, then later on, you can point out that all the products they use every day, all the experiences they have in their daily life, most of those experiences come from companies that are selling shares of themselves, and you can own a little bit of that business and make some money.
I like that. So investing and saving are almost the same thing in this conversation. Like you're just talking about putting money aside for a goal in the future. And we just realized that eventually that you don't get a 12% return on your money when you save it. You're going to have to invest to achieve that. Yeah, I like that a lot. Julie, what would you add?
Yeah, I think that when you're thinking about the types of accounts that you have, that you start for your children, 529s are very specific, right? When you're thinking about investing for education or trade school, whatever it might be,
Yeah.
anything that's going to help them get further along in learning, right? So that really is the way that you kind of start to solidify. This is what you have to do to put yourself in a better position, right? To do more of the things that you want to do. When you think about having a brokerage account for a child, that's truly going beyond that. And that's really about giving them even more flexibility. And so having a brokerage account for them, whenever it is that you choose to start it, it could be early on, just like it is for 529, or it could be when they turn 18 and when you really start having those serious money lessons, when they get their first job, invest for retirement and now invest in a brokerage account that's going to allow you to do things that whatever it is that you dream of. So having or communicating rather what the flexibility is, the flexibility that they're going to create for themselves when they invest through a brokerage account, I think is really powerful, because even for us regular adults, we invest for two reasons. We invest for security, and we invest for wealth, right? Those are the two missions that we have. That should be our focus at all times, making sure that we have a nice, comfortable retirement covering our basic needs. And then beyond that, how can we build wealth for our family and our extended family and the next generation? So it is not a one dinner conversation. It's going to take many conversations to really communicate those points and those differences, so that there is that level of understanding of what they're meant for and how they can truly become empowered by the money that they invest.
Yeah, and we had some great conversations earlier this summer about raising money savvy kids and trying to, I guess, build that saving kind of muscle, or that mentality that, part of our money is going to go towards spending, part will go towards saving. We might have a giving allocation as well. And then eventually we're going to bring in this investing topic too. So please do check out our older events, ChooseFIFoundation.org/events. And you can find some of the earlier ones we did. We had Maya Korbick on from Teach Kids Money, and she had some great views on that too, about like just kind of fun ways to get kids like motivated to invest and save, which I think is part of it. All right. And you guys are kind of hinting at the next part, and that is, how do we get our kids actually interested in doing this? Because it's one thing to, to say like, oh, it's you're going to make so much money. Like they're kind of motivated for like 10 seconds about that before interest dies. And it's like, well, long-term, like delayed gratification is a hard thing for any kid. I feel like our society today, and I sound like an old person already saying this, but our today's society does not know how to delay gratification. What do we do? How do we get kids actually not? They don't even have to be interested in this, right, Doug? I mean, like you had a daughter who was not interested in this, but you still managed to find ways to build these habits. How did you do it?
You start off at a younger age with giving them financial incentives. For example, that bank of kid, that 12% interest rate on the CD was a financial incentive for them to save. They don't have to be interested in saving. If they don't want to save, that's fine. You've just laid the opportunity out in front of them, and now you have regular discussions. And if they're not interested, then the discussions involve, well, how does it feel to not have any money? How does it feel to be wasting all your money on short-term spending and toys that don't last a long time? But when they're interested, now you can start talking about the saving. And if they get even more interested, then you can start talking about ways to earn even more money. And at some point, every kid in school is going to have a project that involves learning about starting a business, right? You're trying to raise those entrepreneurs in elementary school and middle school.
I hope so.
And they're going to watch, they're watching what you do, and then they want some of that for themselves. And so they're going to have that interest on their own eventually. You just have to wait them out until they develop that. You don't want to push that on a kid. You want to wait for that natural interest to occur. And if it's a conversation that happens regularly in your family or on the dinner table, then it's going to occur. And when that starts, then talk about what it's like to run a business, what it's like to be paid, what it's like to earn money in a business, what it's like to own your own business and make money that way. All of those conversations can lead to a discussion of how you could earn money. And yes, you could spend all that money on a really nice cell phone or a really nice video game, but you could also invest that money in other people's companies and own some of their money coming in to make you even more wealthy. All of those things are adulting, and more of us should be doing that. But a kid will look at that as their first entry into adulthood, especially if they've got the earned income that lets them start up and open their own Roth IRA or just the parents running a custodial account for them. We know that some kids are the next Warren Buffett, and at the age of 12, they are going to be hammering on their parents to start that brokerage account for them and let them invest. We don't have to worry about them anymore. All we have to do is stand back and let them run. But other kids, eventually they're going to realize that they've got to move out of mom and dad's basement. They're eventually going to want to be an adult and do their own life. They're going to eventually need to learn something about earning money, saving it, and investing it. And again, those are the conversations that you tailor at the appropriate moment for their interest level.
Yeah. Julie, are you familiar with the marshmallow test?
No, what is that?
You're not familiar with the marshmallow test?
I think so. Is that one a test that they've done to see how long they can wait, delay gratification? Is that the one?
Yes. Doug, I see you like raising your hand here, so go for it. You explain the marshmallow test.
This is one of the great crises in the replication scandal, where they did that study years ago and decided that any kid who could hold off eating that second marshmallow or cookie or whatever the reward was going to succeed in life, and many of them did.
Wow.
But what they also found out was that if that kid had been raised in an environment where they were not able to trust anybody, if they couldn't trust their parents to leave their money alone, if they couldn't trust their parents to leave their food in a refrigerator, if they were not raised in an environment of trust, then the absolute most sensible thing to do when you're in that scenario with a plate full of marshmallows is to eat them all right now before somebody else takes them away from you. Mm-hmm. So that experiment is much more nuanced than just an exercise in deferred gratification, meaning that you're going to be a success in life. However, it tells you a lot about your family.
Right.
So I think the true takeaway from that study was, and for anyone not familiar with this study, if you Google the marshmallow test, you will find some great videos on YouTube that explain what this was. I can't remember the college that did this. But what they did basically was they brought a bunch of young kids into a room. So they were each on their own. They placed a marshmallow in front of them. They said, if you can wait a given period of time, it might've been like 5 minutes. We will come back and give you a second marshmallow. And then they left the room. So they left the kid on their own with the marshmallow. But of course there was cameras keeping an eye on what was happening. And you watch to see, like, did the kid eat the marshmallow? Were they able to wait for that promise of a greater reward? And a lot of kids were able to wait. A lot were not. And what they showed later in life was the ones who were able to wait were generally more successful with managing their money and in other areas of their life too. What Doug is pointing out, of course, is that that is not the cause of their success. There was other factors out there that, there is a correlation between this and the success later in life, but that's not the cause. And the environment that kids grow up in, the way that we teach them to handle money. Do we give them autonomy and choice, or do we dictate everything to them? Those are all going to be very important factors in how successful your child will be at managing money in the future.
Right. And that mindset is so important. It's something that it's hard even for us to learn and to unlearn negative things that we've heard about money in the past. So to teach children about how to look at money as the tool and as the opportunity to do more of the things that they're passionate about and to help more people, I think that's really, really important. I know that for my godsons, that I invest for them through a 529, and automatically they get competitive about it. And they're like, well, how much did yours make? How much? Because they're a couple years apart. So they're invested, their allocations are a little bit different. So it's funny to kind of see them already comparing, stuff that comparing their numbers and making it a little bit of a competition. So I think that can be something that can be very healthy, within a family, to kind of look at stuff together and see and how can you grow it more? Because the first thing that they ask is, well, why is his more than mine? And I'm like, well, let's look at why. Let's look at those companies. And an exercise that I would definitely share with them and do with them is literally as we're walking by. I love reading signs when we're driving to places. So just looking at those brands that we see and correlating them to their accounts. Like, okay, do you know that you actually already have Apple stock? Do you know that they're even within that fund that you have, there's also Microsoft stock, and they're competitors, but you have a little bit of both of them. So it really allows them, just having those small moments, I think allows them to kind of think about, oh, what does that mean? It's not that it's going to happen automatically and they're going to get it, but it really is a great way to relate real life to this digital portfolio, right? Because it's not dollars and coins that they could touch. It's all online. It's all on their phone. So it's I like doing that to kind of let them connect the two together, and also thinking or sharing with them to think about the things that they're using outside of things that we see when we're out traveling. But if you're using certain things, whether they love gaming, okay, who doesn't? All the kids, they love all the games. They have the PlayStation, all that stuff. Who makes that? Right. So those are the questions that I like to ask them so that they think about how the world kind of functions. Like, how did you get this console in your bedroom right now? Let's talk about that. And hey, do you have some of that in your portfolio right now? Let's look. And so I think that those are little things that you can do to kind of just inspire the curiosity. Maybe they will just be index fund investors and never want to look at their portfolio. That can also be the case, but we give them the option by talking about those things, you know?
Yeah. And I think the point you brought up about it not being something that you can physically see is such a hard one, especially with today's money kind of situation. Like, we're going more and more digital with how we do things. Like, my son does not see me pay with anything, like pay for anything with cash anymore. It's all credit cards.
Right.
Doug, when you're doing the bank of mom and dad, how are you visually showing that to the child? So was this Carol that you did this with? Like, how are you showing this? Was it she put $1 in, you dropped a penny in right on top of that? Or was it on a spreadsheet? Or how did you do that?
The answer is yes. And keep in mind that we were doing this back during the last millennium. So when woolly mammoths roamed the earth.
So you had your abacus out. Okay.
What we had to do, we had to make sure we had change on hand in case there was a run on the bank of mom and dad, right? Just if your best customer comes up to you and demands to have all $5.73 back, you'd better have $5.73 on hand ready to give to them right then. That's the way you build trust in a financial institution. But we started with hard cash. And the whole idea is that you want your kids to make all the mistakes they can while they're young and while they're working with small amounts of money. That way, when they're older, they don't start making mistakes with thousands of dollars of their money, or even worse, thousands of dollars of your money. So you want to start out young and concrete. Kids are going to be concrete until they suddenly discover debit cards and online transactions. So it might take an entire decade until they're really interested in going virtual currency and electronic. In the meantime, having those dollars, our daughter would, get her allowance physically handed to her, $1 at a time. For example, when she was 8 years old, she used to get $5 of allowance every week in actual cash for her to spend. And so that was $5 bills, because every 8-year-old knows that 5 $1 bills is worth more than one $5 bill.
Of course.
And then when you have that money, then you talk about all the possibilities and whether or not that could be deposited in the bank of mom and dad. And sometimes she'd come back later and actually deposit $1, at which point I'd say, great, your dollar is going to earn a penny at the end of the month. And again, if she wanted to cash out, we had that cash there. Normally what I would do is I would run our financial software, Quicken. Today I'd have this on her cell phone, but back then we would run the Quicken report that would show that she had $1.01 on deposit, or whatever the numbers were. And then we would talk about the possibilities. And I'd say, well, if you left this on deposit, if you added more money, why? Here's the calculator that shows you how much money you could have at the end of next month. And we would just use that as that springboard for a conversation. Whenever we were going somewhere, if we were spending money on something, we'd point out that this was something that we had a money budgeted for. This was part of our life and our expenses and things that we thought were valuable spending our money on. And so we made sure we had money to budget for it. And we made sure that we had money in the bank and it earned interest and it could pay for that. And we would just keep that conversation going. Now, I can hear my adult daughter rolling her eyes all the way from here right now over all these thousands of conversations we had when she was growing up. But that's how we made it realistic. That's how we made it part of her life. And then whenever she did get her hands on the money, whenever she could make those mistakes, we could have those conversations about feelings. You need to validate the feelings, and you need to let the kids understand what the consequences of their actions are with these relatively small amounts of money and relatively small penalties. And after that, it's internalized. You don't have to admonish them every time they're getting their allowance or every time they're making decisions. You can remind them, how did that feel last time you did that? But you can also just watch them learn to do this on their own, and then they're ready for that checking account. And once they're ready for the checking account, they're probably ready for the debit card or the ATM card. Once they're a little older, you're going to add them as a authorized user on your credit card. There are products out there that let families run a debit card in the family.
Yeah.
And so you pay a company a fee, and they give you all your own debit cards. And so you, the parents, can run the debit cards for your family. So there's plenty of ways to do it and to get out of physical cash. I we were doing this during the last millennium, but I know that there are teenagers out there who get, $50, for example, in the mail from a grandparent for a birthday present, and they don't know what to do with that. They don't feel comfortable wandering into Target and spending that money because they've heard of people spending cash in a store before, but they've never personally done it. And so they want to have an adult with them just to make sure that when they hand that $50 over to the cashier, that they understand what's supposed to happen next and that they're going to get change back and how the transaction goes. I have seen that actual conversation with teenagers with their parents with the cash money. So you got to learn both kinds, and eventually the teenager will tell you how they want to run their financial life.
And I think just with the younger kids, especially, like if you don't want to have the physical cash lying around for whatever reason, you can always replace it with manipulatives of some sort. So like there is tons of play money out there. You can print your own. You can do charts on the fridge that show like how many they have of each thing. Just try and keep it as visual as possible. So if you are going to track their finances in a spreadsheet, don't show them the spreadsheet. Show them like a bar chart that shows what their money is doing, or even better, like how many they have of each coin or dollar or whatever it is. Visual representation works great with kids and with adults too, for that matter. It's not something that we ever really get over. We love looking at our bar charts and the little line going up. Okay, so Julie, what about your nephews? Because you said you've got 2 younger nephews. What kind of strategies have you seen either parents or extended family putting in place to try and like help get them sort of like understanding what's happening here with investing?
Well, yeah, there are so many things within our family. All of us, there are a lot of different dynamics, a lot of different relationships. And my nephews, they're really my little cousins and my godsons, but they also kind of call me Tia as well, which is, aunt. And so I do feel a lot of responsibility within my family to provide for them and to help them with these things, because they have immigrant parents, both of them, that have never had a really secure situation with the financial system here in the US. We're from the Dominican Republic. And so that for me is what made me step up to the plate. I started it a couple of years ago because I knew that if I didn't do it, or if someone else didn't do it, it probably will not get done. And that's something that I am really happy about. And what has transpired in doing that is that they ask me all the time, how is my account doing? And then I look it up and I let them know. I send them screenshots of what it is. And they're already, preteens at this point. I know. So it's really interesting. But I think that that's something that we have to do, especially in immigrant communities, because I myself didn't learn this stuff from my parents. I learned it through the HR department, and then through my self-study and education over the years, I figured it out, and I also had to learn what it is to spend properly and to allocate things for savings and investing. So it's a lot about, it's a challenge because at home, my little boys are listening to parents that may have roadblocks when it comes to money, right? And so when I see them, it's all about kind of undoing that in certain ways, but of course trying to be mindful and respectful. And so I've had a lot of students that take the investing workshop with me, and they tell me, I want to start something for my niece or nephew or whoever it is in the family, but their parent is not on board. And that's something that I definitely maybe felt a little bit resistance on, but also because of how long I've been doing it, there was this sense of, okay, you know what you're doing. I think it'll be fine, but of course, immediately the first question from their mother was, how is this going to affect their financial aid? We don't have money to pay for college. Are they going to have enough in the account? Or are they going to get aid? So all of those things are things that we really do have to sit down and talk about and understand how it works. And something that's really important for all of us to know and to share with all of our community is the actual facts and the numbers. If you are going to have an account, their account, for example, is in their name, it's their account, it's only going to affect them up to 5%. Of the aid that they're going to get. So that's the fact. It's not that just because they have an account, everything is taken away and they won't qualify for anything. So it's important to know those things so that you can make the best decision, because you can't just go off of what you think might happen. find out the data, find out the information, and make those decisions based on that. And another thing is that, we talked a little bit about grandparents giving those $50 away. If you are that one generation away from the child that's going to be the beneficiary, it doesn't even affect their financial aid, because it's not under the parent's name. It's not what the nuclear family can contribute to the education. So if it's a grandparent that has the 529 account, you're good to go. It actually won't even affect them. So I think all those little things are things that still, we have to do a lot of work. I mean, there's always so much work in the personal finance space in terms of learning, and not only just learning those examples that have been around forever, like compounding interest, the one of the wonders of the world, but also how things have changed and how we can adapt to those changes, how new items new services that are out there, the apps, right? Now kids can use those apps and they can save and they can look at, they have an envelope system for kids now. Those things are good. Like if you don't want to bring in the actual dollars, which I get, we're getting further and further away from that, or you don't want to buy the fake dollars, embrace technology, use it, make it work for you, and just share your learnings along the way. Because I think that as adults, we're oftentimes seen as, we try to portray like we know everything to establish that authority with children. And I think that, and maybe it's a little easier for me because I am a little bit detached. These are, my little cousins, but I share with them, the fact that things are changing every day and let's learn together. And the most important thing that we could do when it comes to our money is continuously be learning.
All right, Julie, we had one question pop in just based on what you're saying, so I want to flash it up quick. Mm-hmm. Carlos asks, only 5% no matter how much money is in the account. So I think we're referring to the 529 in the child's name. So this is a question of child assets versus parent assets and how much they're going to. So what we're really talking about is the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. That is going to be when you, the parent, and the child or guardian, whoever is working here, is going to submit this information to the federal government and say, like, this is how much money we have. They will look at how much the parent has, how much the kid has, and determine, okay, this is what we expect you to contribute towards your education, and then we will help provide aid for the rest. So Julie, what is this about the 5%? Does it matter how much money is in the account?
Yeah, truly. And depending on how much there is, there's still going to be that cap and that limit, So even if you have, for example, $30,000 in the account, the contribution is about $1,700 for the year. So that's not a huge contribution considering that you've made, or you have an account that is that's worth $30,000. So it really outweighs how the cons of not, reducing the amount of aid that you're receiving because you've spent so much time investing and your money has grown so much. So it's not something that people should be afraid of. It's important to also plan what it is that you want to have in that account. Some people just want to have enough to pay for a local school or maybe even a trade school, and they'll plan to have maybe $20,000 in the account, $70,000. And then there are people that invest to have $500,000 in the account so that their child can become a doctor, right? So there's very big differences. So all of those things you have to kind of keep in mind, and you want to set that goal from the beginning. How much is it that I need to have? When we think about the numbers, education continues, the cost of education continues to rise about 5% per year. So it's getting more and more expensive. Hopefully there's some sort of control. We can sort of come together as a community and be like, all right, we kind of have to pump the brakes on this. This has been going on. This marathon has been going on for too long, but we want to work with the information that we have right now. And if education is increasing every year up 5%, you want to have an estimate of what that local school is going to cost by the time your child is ready to go to that school. So the number is going to be depending on what you would like and what you feel comfortable with, and also what you can afford to put into the account, right? If you can only afford to put $100 a month into the account, that's wonderful. That's great. They'll use the money to buy the books and the food that they need. It's not always about covering everything. You have to just focus on being able to do what you can do, because at the end of the day, it's also their lives. They kind of have to take their own accountability and responsibility for things as well. So I know that it could be a little bit of a challenge to kind of think about, you want to do it all for them, but I think it should always be a little bit of a balance. Before, I have a lot of people that rather put all the money towards a 529 and have nothing in retirement. I've seen it. I've seen it because working with the Latin community, we have grown up in generations where we just don't talk about money. That's just it. It's not acceptable. It's looked down upon. It's taboo, all of those things. And so there is so much shame around it that the parents feel, I'm a lost cause. Who cares about what my situation looks like financially? Let me just focus on my child. And that's where I have to be like, no, wait a second. We gotta rework this a little bit. So yes, just to kind of bring it back together, make sure that you have a good idea of how much you want to have in the account by the time your child or the person that you're investing for is 18 years old. Understanding, the true purpose of it, and also understanding like there is flexibility. Obviously, if you don't end up using it for education, that's still okay. There will be penalties, of course. You can kind of think about what Doug mentioned earlier, passing it on to somebody else. But ultimately, don't let the fear of we won't get financial aid hold you back from having a $50,000 or $100,000 account.
And I think that comment directly applies to what's up on the screen at the moment with the UTMA or UGMA accounts. For anyone not familiar with the acronyms, these are custodial brokerage accounts or custodial investing accounts for kids. So where the adult is a part owner of the account, the kid's name is on it, and they will become the owner of the account when they turn 18. It does impact student aid, but in the same way that a 529 would. So as Julie said, having money invested is better than not at all. Yes.
When you have that brokerage, that is going to be looked at just pure assets. So instead of that 5%, you're talking about 20%. So they're gonna be like, okay, you got money. So give us some of that money. We're gonna use our financial aid elsewhere. So definitely a very important difference between those two. If you're using the education accounts, of course, they're gonna be like, okay, we get it. You've been saving for this. You've been investing specifically for education. Cool. We only want a little bit of it, right? But if you have that diversity in the portfolio for your child, for yourself and the child, it's definitely going to affect you in a bigger way. And that's really where you have to start thinking, what are the goals for our family? What do you want to do? And ultimately, honestly, those are the people that have those $500,000 accounts because they get it. They're going to have to just pay for school, and as they should, right? You got the money, pay for school.
And I want to bring up a strategy, I guess, that my wife and I are doing. So last year we had all of these stimulus checks come out, and every person in the household got a stimulus check. My son, who is not 2 yet, got a stimulus check, or at least was included in ours. And what we did was we said, well, we don't need it. We are in the very fortunate position where we don't need it. We're going to put it aside for him in a brokerage account so that it can grow. And what we will do before college comes, and at least 2 years before his first year of college, we will shift that money, hopefully, into a Roth IRA, because by that time, he better be working. He better be making some money. Ideally, it'll be through entrepreneurship. So he'll be starting his own business and, making tons of money that way. So we'll just shift it into a Roth IRA, at which point your retirement assets do not count towards what you're expected to pay for college. So if you do have a brokerage account for your kid, it's not a disaster. Don't stop funding it just because you're afraid of what it will do to their FAFSA. So you can always shift it over to an IRA later once they start earning money for themselves. There was a really great episode on this summer series last week with Brian Eufinger and Megan Landris from Student Loan Planner. And we talked all about investing for college, preparing. So what you can do academically, what you can do financially, choosing colleges strategically. Check it out. And I've said this link a couple of times. I'm going to flash it up. ChooseFIFoundation.org/events. And just look for last week's one about planning for college. It has some really great stuff in there from those two. All right. So I think we've covered the types of accounts. That was one thing I wanted to talk about. So I think we're good there. But I want to come back to one thing you said, Julie, and that was that we love being competitive. And your two nephews or cousins are comparing how they're doing. And what we noticed in 2020 was that the amount of young people, so the percentage of young people who are starting to invest went up, which is fantastic, but they're not investing in nice, boring index funds for the most part. They're throwing money into individual stocks, and a lot of money is going into cryptocurrency as well. And let's not even talk about the emergence of these new things, NFTs too. what do we do when young kids are showing this excitement and interest in something that has the potential to grow fast? Like it's a high risk, high reward type of investment. They're really excited about it. And we want to kind of take that and turn it into something a bit more like of an educational moment. Julie, what would you do?
Good luck.
Right?
Yes.
Well, the first thing I definitely want to say when it comes to that, they're excited about something, they're interested, they're like, oh, let's put all our money into Bitcoin. Like, no. I think it's the moment to really actually literally say you don't want to invest or use the money to take the shirt off your back. You have to be very smart with how much you're putting into any sort of investment. It could be something as low risk as an index fund, right? Or something as high risk as an NFT. You want to make sure that you are putting what you can into it. And although it is a lot of fun, you want to have that allocation be appropriate. And so that's a little bit of a probably higher level conversation to have, but I definitely think that we're going to hear those kind of requests from teenagers anyway. So they should be able to handle it, right? So
I get this in school all the time because I teach high school seniors, and
yeah,
they'll come into me like, yeah, I'm investing.
right.
I'm like, oh, what do you invest in? Oh, like the latest coin that I don't even know the name, I've never heard of before. Like, it's the next big thing, guys. It's the next big thing. And I'm like, or GameStop and AMC were so popular this past year, and you don't want to dampen it. Like, you want to be like, yes, I'm so glad you are ready to invest and you want to invest and you want to try and grow your money. But we gotta talk about where our money's going. So Doug, what would you do?
Well, I have this conversation with 35-year-old adults every day. They're diversifying into both Bitcoin and Tesla, so they all know they're going to be fine for retirement. So having this conversation with a 15-year-old means that you're really having a conversation about adulting. So they're going to pay attention to that. And you introduce two new terms: diversification and asset allocation. And you say, yes, Bitcoin is the future. That's awesome. And that's exactly what you should invest in. And because it's going to grow so fast, you should limit your asset allocation to 10% Bitcoin. That way, the other 90% of your money is locked up in index funds, stocks, bonds, whatever traditional investments that they can be persuaded to put their money into. And that 10% in Bitcoin will be enough to move the needle on your net worth if you turn out to be a brilliant investor. And that 10% in Bitcoin will also be small enough to limit the damage if it turns out you're not as brilliant as you think. And so you talk about, what if Bitcoin crashes, or what if it explodes and suddenly you have a $5 billion Roth IRA? Or what happens if Tesla goes out and makes a fundamental shift in American transportation technology and that makes you rich? Well, it doesn't matter what the other 90% is in. That other 90% is in there to make sure that you do have some money for retirement someday if Bitcoin, if Tesla should reproduce many decades of American stock market history and actually flame out on their own. So when you have that conversation about asset allocation, you're also giving that person permission to do what they think is the smart thing to do anyway, is to buy enough Bitcoin to brag about it at the family dinner, to look at on their net worth statement, and to understand they've got a piece of something new and cool and way better than anything mom and dad ever invested in. That's good enough. That's 10%. The rest, put that in something that has history behind it, has reproduced at a reasonable rate of return for decades, if not a century, and will give you money to make sure that you have something for starting a family, for reaching financial independence in your 30s, and for eventually retiring. Bitcoin might do it in your 20s, but you also got a backup plan.
Yeah, I was teaching a class to other teachers for the past 6 weeks, and all beginners to personal finance. It was like here's how we teach kids about money, and you start by teaching teachers about money so that they can eventually pass on some decent lessons. And we played a game this morning. And for those of you who like games, or your kids like games, highly recommend you play this one with your kids. Have you guys heard of Build Your Stacks?
Yeah.
So buildyourstacks.com. Pull it out, play it with your kids, or play it yourself. It's really fun to play. It takes about 20 minutes. And this is 20 years of investing in 20 minutes. So you're going to go through some random 20-year period in time. So they actually base the numbers off of US stock market performance.
Yep.
And you can let your kids experiment with, oh, well, here's a certificate of deposit. Here's an index fund. Here's 5 individual stocks you can choose from. Here's something like gold or cotton or bonds. And let them do some simulations where they try the high risk, high reward stuff, see if they can repeat that performance multiple times. And if they can, maybe you've got an investing genius on your hands and you just let them go. But the likelihood is they're going to realize, oh, the individual stock it's a high risk, high reward. It's not always going to win. The index fund does typically do well over a 20-year period. So that's a great place to have a lot of your money. And then, yeah, sure, keep 10% for doing something that excites you and really holds your interest and you want to learn more about. Like, learning and trying new things is absolutely something we want to encourage. And we don't want to ignore a new investment just because it's never been seen before.
I would also acknowledge the possibility that maybe they're right. Maybe Bitcoin is the next big thing, and maybe you really are too old to invest in the stock market anymore.
And what I did with my kids when we were talking about cryptocurrency is, well, how do you know Bitcoin's the right one? And I'm like, I'll buy it. I think blockchain sounds amazing, but I don't know that Bitcoin's the right coin. There's so many of them. Yeah. And they'll say, well, I do a little bit of Bitcoin. I've got some Ethereum. I've got some Starcoin or whatever, Dogecoin. Like, there's so many different ones out there. And I'm like, okay, cool. So you are starting to diversify within an asset class. You can do more of that. And that's usually when we bring up the conversation about ETFs as well, where you can say somebody has already bought a little bit of all of these things. You can own a slice of that instead. And that's kind of how an index fund works too, guys. That's just a little bit of all the stocks in the US or the top 500 or the international or pharmaceuticals. Like, so we try and encourage them to diversify even within their own interests, just again, to reduce the risk that they're going to lose everything in one go. Even though that's probably a great lesson, as you said, Doug. The best thing that probably could happen is that it would go to zero, right?
Yeah. And I think also just that mix of different generations, there's nothing better than that. There's nothing better than you having the experience that you have with the assets that you've accumulated over the years, and also seeing a fresh perspective. You're in a sense hiring someone that's a financial advisor. We can call them that. And I think that it wouldn't even be it would actually wouldn't be too far stretched to say something like that, because if they are interested in these kind of things, I encourage it. Keep asking them questions, tell them to do some homework and to tell you why Bitcoin is the one versus Dogecoin, and that's a way to help them feel that they're very involved in their own portfolio. They're contributing to it. That's going to get them to engage more into it and become more excited about it.
I love that. Just like that little push to do a bit more kind of education before they invest in something. When we play stock market game in school, so this is stockmarketgame.org, one of the things that each team has to do is submit a proposed portfolio before they buy anything. And it just has to show that they've actually looked at the stocks that they want to buy, more than just like, oh, I see Nike on my shoes, I'm buying Nike. Like, let's actually look at that and let's compare it to something like an Under Armour or an Adidas. And it's like, why is Nike the one you want to own? And they just have to give a quick description of why. And if they do that, cool, go buy it. You've done something that indicates you've done a little bit of research. So I think that's a really great point. For those of you watching at home, we've got about 10 minutes left. If you have questions, please put them in the comments. We'd love to answer those. The next and final question I have for you guys before we open up to the floor is, how do I go and buy a stock for somebody else who is not, say, my own child, or is not myself? So like, if I want to gift a stock to somebody, how do I do that? Doug, I see your hand up. Yes, sir.
We do that in our family. And the way you do it is you talk to the brokerage and you say, I want to have these shares of whatever asset I own go to this person over here. Now, you could just send that person a check for $100 and say, go buy $100 of this stock. But if you take the money, the stock that you have bought, and send that share to them through the brokerage account, it's just a transfer, and it shows up in their account, then that's all there is to it. And you can literally buy shares of Disney in your account, your personal account, and gift 5 or 10 shares, whatever the number might be, of Disney to that person in their account. Again, I know that with Fidelity, it still requires a phone call just to make sure that there's no fraud or theft going on, but that phone call will make the money show up in their account. And of course, Fidelity is happy to get a new investor's account data and get that going and provide you that customer service. And it's free, but they know that they're going to have more people trading more stocks that way, maybe see more wealth transferring through the generations. There are some tax issues. For example, if you bought Disney at $5 and it's worth $10, I have no idea what the real value of a share of Disney is today, thank goodness. But if you do that, then the person that you gift the stock to has to be willing to pay the capital gains taxes on any gains that occurred, because it was the gains that you have transferred to them, and eventually they might have to pay taxes on it. I wouldn't let that hold you back. I'd just say that's a great starting point for another conversation about taxes, capital gains, holding periods, and other things about the stock. There are still a few companies in America, a very few, that will actually issue a stock certificate.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to send them an actual piece of paper, something they can frame and put up on their wall, that's great. Personally, I'd go look for an image of a stock certificate and print that out and frame that for them so they can leave it in a brokerage account and not have to worry about losing it. But those are two very concrete ways to show somebody what it means to own a part of that company's revenue stream.
Yeah, and I guess the problem that would pop up is, what if the kid does not yet have a brokerage account?
Mm-hmm.
Right. That person would either have to be 18 years old enough to open up their own brokerage account, or they'd have to have a responsible adult nearby who would allow them to open that up in their and it could be you. You could open up a custodial account for that perfect stranger. It doesn't just have to be your kids or your nibblings. And so by doing that, then they have somebody who's now a role model for investing, and you can nerd out about that stock shares that they've transferred back and forth, or what the next big investment should be. So that's a great way to start a conversation about investing. And I'll make another plug for that. If you really want to start a conversation about index funds, then transfer shares of an index fund and show them why this is the best index fund and why it's even better than Disney or Tesla.
Yeah, Julie, what would you add? Like, how do you do it for your nephews? Did you have to have a talk with parents about, like, we need to set them up a brokerage account? Did you set it up and you are the custodian of it, or how does that work?
So with 529s, you can't be a co-custodian. It's only one person that it's under. So it's under the child's name. There is the person that manages it, which is me. I'm listed there as the custodian of the account. And then their mom is listed. If something were to happen to me, she would be the next one in charge to take care of it. So you don't need to have that second person listed after you, but I think it's a smart thing to do, because you never know what can happen with any account. I'll take the moment to say, with any account, you should have a beneficiary beyond yourself, because we are made of skin and bones, okay? So you want to make sure that you do have someone that can, and you want to let them know. So what I like to do with the people in my family is, on a yearly basis, typically kind of around my birthday, I'll send an email and let them know, this is what I have in accounts. You are a beneficiary on this account. You are listed under this account. You have this as on record, so you can reach out to these companies if something were to happen to me, because stuff gets lost all the time, and of course the people that will benefit from it are the corporations, right? If the money's just sitting there and no one comes knocking on the door for it. So you want to make sure to do that. When it comes to the amount that you're gifting, you do want to keep in mind that $15,000 per year is our limit in terms of the gift tax. Right. So if you're nowhere near that, you have nothing to worry about. But if you are in that range where you're gifting that amount, or you do gift a stock that has appreciated aggressively, depending on which tax lot you're transferring over, you wanna do some work in terms of your taxes and understand how that will affect you and them, right? Because they're the ones that are going to be responsible for it, because they're the ones receiving the gift beyond that point. So keeping that in mind, $15,000 per year, you can definitely dig into it further to understand that a little bit deeper. You can also advance them. So that means that you can actually do 5 years in 1 year, and then on your taxes, note that, okay, you did do that 5 years ago. So there's still that note in terms of what you've gifted other people. So please gift away. If you have the resources, if you can do it, especially if you can gift something that is going to continue appreciating and continuing to build your family, or even a perfect stranger who you care about. If it's going to help them in life, please go ahead and do it.
And I guess one strategy that neither of you mentioned that I would do, and Doug, I guess you kind of did, is printing stock certificates. I had two siblings that were younger than me that actually I did for all three siblings. We're living in Ireland at the time. So like opening a brokerage account for them in the US was not something we could do just then and there. And what I did was I bought stocks in my own brokerage account, and I sent them a stock certificate basically saying, you own 1 share of this, and I'm just holding it for you in your name until you have an account that I can transfer it to.
Nice.
And that worked very well. I let them I gave them a choice of 5 stocks that they could pick from that were all within my price range at the time, because there was no fractional shares. And I was like, pick from one of these, whichever one you want, and I will buy it for you and hold it for you until you're ready to get it. They chose things like Nintendo and L Brands, and I think Under Armour, and my brother with Under Armour, poor fella. But the rest of them did just fine. And yeah, as soon as they were ready, I was able to say, yep, here you go. There's your stock. It's appreciated by this amount. I think I even took the tax hit on it. I sold it and then gave them the cash for it, and they just bought it again themselves. But that was a nice way to at least get them even interested in it. Just handing them that first stock certificate. I don't think they'd ever really considered stocks before. And this was kind of like you with your cousins. How's it doing? What price is it at? It's like, oh, right. The little bug is there. I want to know more about this.
It's those conversations and those teachable moments. And you were mentioning the gift tax, $15,000 gifting. And I have people come to me and say, well, how much do I have to pay for the gift tax? And the answer is, of course, you don't have to pay anything. $15,000 per person per year that you gift them to. And that multiplies out fairly quickly. But when you give more than that $15,000, all you have to do is file a form with your next tax return that says, hey, I just gifted somebody more than my $15,000 limit, so now I have to tell you about it, and you're going to have to take that off of my estate tax return. Many, many decades from now, when I finally pass away, we're going to have to note that I gave $15,002 to somebody instead of the $15,000 limit. But that also comes into estate planning, something that's weighed on my mind fairly significantly in these last few years, where maybe you want to pass on some of your inheritance to your adult children now, while everybody's still around to talk about it. And that's one of the discussions about whether you want to gift more than $15,000 per year, or whether you want to limit that amount and save that exemption for your estate tax. Again, many, many decades from now when you pass away.
Okay, that's something I definitely didn't know. I didn't realize that the tax didn't happen right then and
there's no actual tax; that it comes at the back end. So you're giving them a little of their inheritance in advance, and maybe, ideally, right after you make your millions of dollars later in life, and they inherit all of that from you, then maybe that will affect their taxes later. But I think the real value comes from when the first generation turns over to the next adult generation and has that discussion about that inheritance and what you would do with it. And maybe your adult children, if they're doing well, maybe if they understand this stuff and they get it and they're well on the track to financial independence, maybe if they're smarter than mom and dad at that point of their lives, well, maybe it makes sense to give some money to them in their 20s and 30s when it'll really make a difference in their life and in the kinds of decisions they make about safety and security. To do that while they're in their 20s and 30s, so that they don't have to inherit in their 60s when it has no significant effect on their net worth.
Very fair point. All right, we got 2 questions.
All right.
First one comes in from Carlos. Is it true that if students receive scholarships, we can take that money out of the 529 without fines and penalties? Doug has a thumbs up, so that is a yes. So you can just directly withdraw that dollar for dollar with no fines or penalties.
You will have to pay taxes on the gains if you withdraw it. But if they earn a scholarship, that means that you don't have to leave the money in the 529 anymore. So if they go to, for example, I'll just pull one out of the air, and they get a scholarship from the military's ROTC, or even worse, if they go to a service academy, that's a perfect reason to pull money out of the 529 and put that back into your retirement account, or send that to the next beneficiary of a 529, somebody who is going to need that for their own college education.
Awesome. All right. And then, Julie, what do you think here? I have a newborn in New Jersey. Congratulations on the newborn. And I'm a little confused about which account to open up. Would you do a 529 or which state plan would you choose if you were going to do that?
Yeah. So, hey, you're my neighbor. I'm in New York. So I think that congratulations, first of all, on your newborn. It makes total sense for you to take advantage of your 529 because you will get the state benefit in New Jersey, just as we do here in New York. It's $10,000 for us. I believe it's also the same for New Jersey, but double check that. Of course, you can literally just go directly to the horse's mouth, irs.gov, and confirm by your state to make sure that what that amount is. You want to take advantage of that. And it's one of the big reasons why I do it. It helps reduce my taxable income as I'm investing, so not only is it a benefit for the children, but it's also a benefit for me. So choosing which exact plan, I happen to go with the official state one. You can open up a 529 with any broker out there. And there aren't just big brokers, there are tons of small brokers out there as well. So you could essentially open it anywhere. I think the most important thing is to make sure that the expenses on it are low. That's how I prefer to invest overall, making sure that expenses are low because I'm not filthy rich. So I like to keep the expenses low and control how much I am spending to have these type of accounts. But that's really all you need. Go ahead, check out the state's 529, check out what your benefit is in whatever state you're in. I'm sure there are people watching from everywhere. And then also know that you don't have to use the one in your state. You can use a different state's 529 account. A lot can go into making that decision, but I think you should definitely consider just doing your state's 529. Make life easy, get started. Go ahead, Doug.
And speaking as a grandparent, I'd say make sure everybody in your family, everybody in your circle of friends and relatives knows that you've started a 529 account for your newborn. And that tells them two things. One, you're taking care of their need for college or for higher education, whatever they're going to spend it on. And two, when it comes to that birthday time and they have a choice of sending you a toy trumpet or a toy drum set or making a deposit in your 529 account, you can direct them toward the 529 account. Or so I've heard.
We like that. I get the whole family involved. I'm like, listen, everybody, let's do this. There's no better way to get one thing done than by working together. So.
And most kids don't need more stuff. They do need help with getting into college or paying for college. So yeah, absolutely. If you can help that next generation do it without student loans, because we know what a problem student loans have been for the current generations that have them. Let's try and do that. Okay, let's wrap it up tonight. Doug, can you tell us a little bit about what you're working on and where we can find more about Geo?
Well, I write at the Military Guide, and I've got a book out that talks about military financial independence for military families. More importantly to this conversation, raising your money-savvy family for next-generation financial independence is in libraries all across the country. Go look for it there in any format you want. The audio book, I think, is going to outsell the ebook and the print version. And if you like it, then go ahead and buy a copy if you want it. And of course, you're always welcome to contact me either through the Military Guide, but also there is my daughter's website, and she's probably more of the expert on that subject. Talk to her at childfire.com to learn more about products and things. I've heard, Rob, that ChooseFI is coming out with some more products that are related to the book, more on the theme of financial independence for families. So we'll see more stuff coming in September or October down the road that relate to this book and to the other books that ChooseFI has published about family financial literacy.
Yeah, I'm really excited for Brian Feraldi's new book. So if you're not familiar with Brian Feraldi, great friend of the show, he's publishing through ChooseFI Publishing, and that is Why Does the Stock Market Go Up? And it's written in a language that a teenager could understand. I've asked him about that. He's like, yes, I would hands down recommend this book for a high school student or even a middle school student. So we're going to have another great resource coming down the pipe that you can share with your kids. I also love Retire by 45's book, Investing for Kids. Relatively new book, only came out in the last year, but has exploded on Amazon in terms of reviews and ratings, and seems to be a wonderful resource. I got it and gifted it to my nephew, and he seems to be devouring it. So I'm excited about that. Good. All right, Julie, tell us where we can find Geo. Julie, you're on mute again, aren't you?
Oh gosh. Thank you guys. It's been so fun. I feel like we could have gone on forever. We'll have to have a part 2 in the future. Thanks for all the questions, everyone. I'm over at investinglatina.com. My main place where you can always find me hanging out, drinking something is on Instagram, Investing Latina. And I teach investing workshops. So if you would like to join one of my workshops, I do them every month. And they are all about everything from index funds to Bitcoin, so that you can have that diversification that we all need in our portfolios.
All right. And thank you all so much for joining us tonight. Please do follow the speakers. If you are not following ChooseFI Foundation yet, give us a follow as well. If you're watching on YouTube, we'd really appreciate the subscribe click and then liking the video as well. And if you know anyone who can benefit from this conversation, the replay is going to be available wherever you're watching it right now. So on YouTube or on Facebook, just tag people in comments, share it with them, and let them know, like, hey, this is a great conversation. You should check this out. All right. Thank you all for joining us tonight. We'll see you next week for our last conversation. We're going to be talking about activities that families can do that are FI friendly. Talk to you then.
All right.
Bye, everyone.
All right. Thanks, Rob.